Restaurants are a manufacturing plant. You got raw materials that come in the back. Something happens to them in the kitchen, and you got finished product that goes out the front. And that has to operate flawlessly. You know, when you ask, how can just a regular person can't design a restaurant? Well, first you have to understand how they operate and how they function.
This week, it is my long-awaited, hotly anticipated guest calling in from Dallas, Bruce Russo, the most acclaimed, award-winning restaurant designer in the United States. In the hour ahead, Bruce and I are combining his restaurant design, consulting, and operation of nearly 600 concepts with my years of restaurant consulting and marketing to talk about what really makes restaurants thrive, barely survive, or fail. Because we want to see all of our 159 food and beverage establishments in Laguna Beach thrive. All right, we're ready to talk with Bruce. Are you on the phone with us, Bruce?
I am.
Well, hi, Bruce. It's good to hear from you. How are you doing in Dallas?
Happy Monday.
Why, thank you so much. It's great to have you. And I know
it's my honor.
I know that you're familiar with Laguna Beach because you and your wife lived right up the hill from us, didn't you, for a while? You had a house here.
22 years.
22 years. That's right. And so I had some friends having dinner with me the other night, and we were talking about your imminent return here on my radio show and in Laguna Beach, because you did actually work on a restaurant here in Laguna Beach.
I did.
You did. And it was initially called, okay, so what year was that? We have to think.
Maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, right. So it was the 222 Ocean Avenue building, which is now empty. There's rumor that we have some people coming in, but we haven't gotten confirmation on it yet. And you know I never spread rumors, right? Right, Bruce?
No, we're not the rumor type.
We are not the rumor type. We are the truth type. So he came in for the Lombardi family, and you built, it was called Taverna, correct? Correct. And then it was turned over to Craig Strong, who came in from the Montage Studio and started his own Ocean at Main. And then Craig left for a beautiful country club. We miss him sincerely. And it's been 2 restaurant concepts since then. We miss having your touch here in Laguna Beach.
Well, you know, whenever I visit, I have to stop by because that was it wasn't a restaurant when I started.
That's
and
right.
The only way it was able to become a restaurant was to rebuild the entire building to the point of historical acceptance of about 95%.
Yeah.
Which was originally built as the Laguna Savings and Loan.
Oh, no kidding. Laguna Savings and Loan. I remember it as a Big Dog store, Big Dog T-shirt store, and then it became like a rug store. Wasn't that what it was before you guys took over?
Was, yes. And
okay, well, I'm jumping ahead of myself here because we can get to that in a minute. So I really want people to have an idea of you and some of the history of you here. And we'll quickly move through this because I know a lot of people are really interested in what you and I have to say about restaurants. But I really want to know what got you into restaurant design in the first place.
Well, I was hooked. I got hooked at a very, very early age. In 1974, I helped a friend's uncle build a burger concept.
And weren't you like 17?
Yeah, I was. And although I knew a lot about construction, it was my really the first introduction to building a restaurant. And although it was only 900 square feet, I thought, how is he going to make money in 900 square feet? I didn't get it. Mm-hmm. Well, lo and behold, the smaller size created a cozy space that became a big desire for all the clients.
Right.
And the place was packed all the time.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. So when who had designed the restaurant? Was it the owner, the friend of?
Yeah, it was drawn on notebook paper.
But he had a lot of experience with restaurants?
He did work for a restaurant concept, but I don't know which one it was.
Interesting.
But he was an experienced restaurateur. To what degree, I don't know. And but what we did was all, hey, we got to hurry up. We got to get in, get out. You know how to do this. You know how to do this. So, I mean, we built it pretty quick. I want to say we built it in maybe 4 or 5 weeks.
Oh my gosh. So what was your biggest takeaway? So you were raised in sort of like a general contractor's home, correct?
Third generation.
Okay. So that's why you had all the background in construction.
Yeah. It was decided what I was going to be when I was in the womb.
So what was your biggest takeaway from what you did at the hamburger restaurant? What got you hooked?
You know what the hook was? It's like, man, I helped build this place, and now there's people standing in line every day outside the door.
Right.
And that was kind of the hook. And, I did a lot of things in Cleveland, construction-wise, and then I moved to Dallas, and it wasn't long after I was here, I got back into the restaurant construction side of it, and it just grew from there.
And how many years would you say you've been in restaurants, pretty much specifically?
Pretty steady for probably the last 28 years, on and off for the past 35 years.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And you have restaurant concepts all over the United States now, right? Yes. And you said that you had some here in California as well, Southern California.
I did. Yeah, we did. There was 4 in Rancho Cucamonga I did. There was a concept in Manhattan Beach on Rosecrans that we renovated.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the one in Laguna. Then there was one in San Diego that we renovated.
So how many total concepts? I've been giving people sort of a general number. How many total concepts you think you got out there?
We're in excess of 550.
Okay, wow.
Now it looks like we got 14 on deck through 2026.
No kidding, 14. 14.
Yep.
You're going to finish 14 restaurants.
Yeah.
Are they mostly in the Dallas area?
No. 2 in Houston, and then the rest will be in Dallas.
Do you go to these sites a lot?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I know that's how I met you, because when you were here in Laguna Beach, you were at that place every single day.
Yes. Yeah, there's a portion of the project where, I have to devote a lot of personal time to make sure all the details are put in place the way they need to be. And that particular project that in Laguna, the tough part was shoehorning in all the equipment and all the mechanical pieces of the puzzle and still maintain the apartment above.
Oh, right, because it does have that apartment above.
Yes.
Yeah. So for people who aren't familiar with 222 Ocean, it has a big patio. And then how many seats did you have inside initially? Because I don't think the seating occupancy has really changed.
I seem to think it was like 150 on the inside.
I think that was about right. Yeah. And then you had an apartment up top that was, did you make that into office space or was it a residence?
When I originally did it, it was put back as an apartment for the owner to spend evenings there when he was in town. Mm-hmm. And then when Craig Strong took it over, I think it got converted to like a private dining.
Oh, right. I remember that.
And I believe Craig had private parties up there. Very exclusive. I don't think you can get more than 10 people.
Yeah, I never got to go to one of those private parties. I bet it was amazing with that cooking skill. That man's amazing.
But it was pretty unique because, that there was a lot of, we refurbished a lot of architecture on the second floor.
Oh, no kidding. Interior and exterior?
Oh, yeah, trust me. It was a very strict undertaking, and being that, the historic office for Laguna is only 2 doors away.
Mm-hmm.
It made it real convenient for inspections to happen just at any time.
That's awesome. Yeah, we love those. We love those inspectors. Okay.
And they did happen at any time. So,
and it's interesting because I know in most cases what you prefer to work with is just a slab. You prefer to build up from the ground. And to move into a space that has historical reservations and requirements is quite another undertaking, in addition to what you're already doing to provide a restaurant space.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So the big challenge there was, the material selection was very small.
Mm-hmm.
We couldn't go outside of the realm of the building was built on.
Right.
So all the materials that went into the finishes had to match the historic.
Wow, that's amazing.
I mean, the stucco texture and, like the windows, there was a gentleman, Ulysses, that was he was a great help in working with me on the project. And, there were things where we get out of meetings and just look at one another and say,
Did you just hear
wow.
that? Did you just hear that?
Like the windows, we couldn't put new windows in. We had to take the old windows apart and have them custom milled to match all the moldings,
Wow.
profiles that was in the original building.
Right. Yeah, wow.
And, we couldn't change the glass because it had the original wavy glass, old glass with arcs in it. And, so we couldn't do insulated glass. But at the end of the day, it ended up a beautiful building.
Yes, it certainly did.
I've probably said it 100 times if I haven't, but hats off to every person that worked with me on that project.
Well, it's got to be different when you come in from another town and you don't have your usual crew with you, because you and I were talking the other day, everyone in your crew is in your crew. They're employees. And that's why you get restaurants put up so quickly, because everybody, has this inner dialogue. They already know what they're doing, and they all are familiar with working with each other.
Correct. My entire trade staff, together, we've probably built over in excess of 200 restaurants.
Right.
So everybody that is on the project, carpenters, electricians, plumbers, mechanical, everybody knows how to build a restaurant. There is absolutely no learning.
Well, and I was talking with another restaurant designer guy the other day when I was up at Nia Pizza, and so give us an idea why a regular architect isn't necessarily the best choice for a restaurant, or even contractors, trade people that you were just talking about, the plumbers, the electricians, why they really need to have a specificity for restaurants.
Well, it's a very small niche. You can kind of categorize restaurant construction along with hospital construction, because the code parameters that we follow in restaurants is pretty much the same as a hospital, except for the med gas. Our fire codes are the same, the health codes are the same, all the ADA compliance, everything's the same. So, that's a very fine niche, number one. Number two, you have to be cost effective in order to make money, because the scope is so large. Right. And there's no room for error because the schedules are so demanding.
Right, I get that. Yeah.
It's all about opening day. It's all about the opening day.
And when you say that, what do you mean by that, when you say it's all about the opening day?
Well, this is how it typically works. When you sit with the clients and design gets to the point where you're ready for a permit, then you start talking opening day. Mm-hmm. And then a day is selected on the calendar, and everything backs into that date from where you're at that point. Anything that costs days, you either add to that schedule or deduct from that schedule.
Right.
And, it's all about the opening day. And, then you got to pick when does ownership start hiring? When do they start training? When, you know what I'm saying? So mm-hmm. It's tough to juggle all of it.
Right, exactly.
But we do it. We do it every day.
So in case people aren't familiar with the different kinds of concepts, the different kinds of restaurant concepts, can you briefly say, okay, how we talk about counter service, we talk about fast casual, we talk about. So go through the primary concepts so that when we start talking about these, people are more familiar with, kind of can picture in their mind what it is.
Well, fast casual would be your typical chains like In and Out. Is a fast. That's a fast casual concept. It's. I mean, some have dining rooms, some don't. Like McDonald's when it first started, that was a concept that you walked up and grabbed. Believe it or not, that type of concept is got a strong headwind right now, and that's really, we're starting to see a lot of that come back to where their dining room doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
It's strictly a walk-up window, and you place your order, you get your order, and you're on your own. You sit on the patio or go in your car or take it home. So that's kind of the starting point. And then from there, it goes to a fast casual, which, a fast casual concept can be from a $10 check average to a $20 check average. And then we have what you call chef-driven fast casual, which goes from a $25 check average up to a $40 check average. Okay, so that kind of categories. And I mean, you go to Irvine, and you can see all those restaurants there, and
right.
It's not hard to pick out which one is which.
Right, exactly.
And then you get into the fine dining. Fine dining is typically a check average in excess of $85 to $90. The check average, typically in upscale dining is $150 to $200 per plate. And that includes the meal, that includes dessert, that includes your alcohol. So that's kind of the top of the spectrum.
And would you say that... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
There's one more that's above that, and that would be fine dining, to where it's a fixed menu, and it's a fixed price, to where that can go anywhere from $200 a plate to $350 a plate.
Right. So, for instance, our Rebel Omakase that just won a Michelin, they are fine dining prefix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The chef is the rock star of the night. It's usually less than 40 people. You don't know what the menu is until you get there.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So now we have these concepts all sorted out. So you said that the walk-up is becoming more. It's becoming a more popular opinion. Is it becoming that way because of labor costs or operation costs? I mean, what do you think is driving it to that concept?
I think labor costs have a lot to do with it. I think the difficulty in finding proper staff, talented staff, wait staff in a restaurant, they're your front and center of the concept. They are your concept, and the hardest part for any restaurant owner that has wait staff is trying to drill the DNA of the concept into that staff.
Right.
So that the staff sells the concept to the client that they're waiting on as if they were the owner themselves.
Right. Very well put. Right.
And let me tell you, that's in the restaurant business, I'm going to tell you right now, that's the hardest job for any owner to do.
Right. Yeah, I've actually been working with a Michelin-starred operations director. He's, always worked in the big Michelins, and now he's at a gigantic country club up in Rolling Hills. And he's actually designed an app for that, for better training, and more consistent training, because he has a staff of, 300 people. Some are in, some are out for 2 days. They're not there for the pre-shift, meetings. They're, they don't know what the new cocktail is and what the new thing is that you're supposed to put on top of the new cocktail. So he's actually worked out this whole new app where you're able to share the information quickly with all of your team, and they check off and, they go through the training sort of in more of a video fashion online so that you can actually keep them. And then you have, the set meetings and the check off meetings and the quizzes and that kind of thing to make sure that they're starting to understand the material. But, these are the things when you're working with part-time contractors, and sometimes they're sick and sometimes they shift their shift with somebody else. There's all that going on. And that human personnel thing is just, I mean, it's big. I've talked with Ivan Spears here. He's got Skyloft, Bodega, Mozambique, and Ramari. He's got 400 employees.
Yep.
It's a big job. It's a big task to have all of that training going on all of the time.
Yep. Oh, trust me, I know.
Yeah.
You know, nothing says that the staff only works for them. That, you know, they could be working at 2 other restaurants in town.
Right, it's true. Yeah.
You know, and that's the MO. And, you know, it's tough to provide labor force for restaurants in Laguna because, you know, the staff that works in the restaurants don't live in Laguna. They live on the outskirts of Laguna. You know, and sometimes transportation is hard to get there. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you know.
Many of the restaurant owners in town would tell me that they sometimes have to pay their dishwashers more than they pay anybody else in the restaurant because it's so hard to get dishwashers all the way into Laguna Beach. And especially when we were hit with COVID and then we're coming out of the COVID situation, it was really difficult. People didn't want to have to travel all the way over here. So I can see where it can be a big issue for people for sure.
Yep.
Okay, so let me get back to some of the experience that you have as an architect in restaurant design.
Okay.
Which categories of restaurants do you like working in the most, or do you have a favorite?
You know, I like the chef-driven fast casual, and then the upper scale fine dining. So, you know, that's the 35 to 4,000 square foot restaurant. Then there's a big gap, and what we're seeing now is, you know, the fine dining, $100 and up check average. Those seem to be coming into. No, they're about 9,000 or more square feet.
No kidding.
Yeah.
For what check average?
Here's the trouble. Well, here's what you have to understand, and any operator that's listening will understand it. You know, at 3,500, it becomes a benchmark for overhead. You can get by with minimal overhead with 3,500 square foot of restaurant. When you get into 4,500 to 5,000 to 6,000, you need just as much overhead to run 5,000 square feet as you do 9,000 square feet.
Interesting.
So there's a profit void there from the 3,500 to the 8,500.
No kidding. But, you know, in towns like this, you know, I was talking with one of the chef owners last week, and he said, you know, in Laguna Beach, it's really difficult to have a restaurant over 3,500 square feet because we just don't have the personnel. We don't have the people here in the winter.
No. And you don't have, you know, the customer base in Laguna is more, it's, what I experience, it's more local, and I know the tourists come in from time to time, but, you know, that's not what a restaurant operates on. You got to have the locals, the loyalty of the local people in order to survive in a city like Laguna, and you know, I just don't ever see anybody building 10,000 square feet. It just doesn't make sense.
No. I mean, the biggest restaurant I think we have is Red Dragon. Well, Mozambique is a very large restaurant. I'll have to ask Ivan about his square footage there because that is, you know, that's 3 levels. That's a lot. Yeah. That's a big restaurant.
Well, but see, now 3 levels, you know, that could be 3 concepts in one.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
an operational sense. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So explain that a little more for people so that they understand what you're talking about.
Well, let's say the first floor as you walk in is a bar.
Mm-hmm.
That entire first floor works totally different than the second floor where their dining is.
Right.
Because the wait staff is different on the second floor than the cocktail wait staff on the first floor.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the specifics on how those 2 operate are different. Then let's say you go to the third floor, which is the private dining space.
Mm-hmm.
That totally works different from the other 2 spaces because when the third floor fills, it fills at 50 to 60 or however many people it'll hold at one time.
Mm-hmm.
So all those tickets come up in the kitchen at one time.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, for the best world, it would be nice to just have one cook line that only handles the PDR side of the restaurant because when those 50 or 60 tickets hit the cook line, the rest of the restaurant that's being fed by the same kitchen is not affected.
Correct.
Their ticket time is not affected. You see what I'm saying? Oh, yes, because I know when I was doing events and hiring, putting events into restaurants here in Laguna Beach, that was the biggest issue. You have 50, 60 people sit down, everything goes into the kitchen, and everyone else out there is kind of like left hanging. The 2 tops, the 4 tops, that kind of thing. Another interesting thing, I want to get back to the private dining, but another interesting thing is our rooftops. I remember Craig Cannoli was here working with Chris Keller, and they had Castle del Camino. They had the rooftop up top. I think you were here when rooftop was still operating.
Yeah.
And under Craig's operating. And, he had this great restaurant down below called Kaya. Well, the food had to be entirely different to try to make it all the way up the stairs and out to the, exterior. So they had to have an entirely different menu. They had to prep it in an entirely different way. They had to deliver it in an entirely different way. So, you really are looking at different miniature restaurants inside a restaurant.
Correct. And, I can tell you I've designed many kitchens that function that way.
Mm-hmm.
I just designed a pickleball facility, and it's got 3 bars and 2 kitchens. And because there's a restaurant on the second floor that holds about 150 people, and the owner's like, no, we don't need a kitchen on the second floor. We're just going to run plates up and down the steps or the elevator. I said, okay, so you're going to turn it 3 times. That's 450 plates of food.
Right.
You're going to do that 7 days a week. I can assure you the first week you did that, you're going to call me to put a kitchen in on the second floor. So you might as well put it now. Now, you don't need an entire kitchen, but what you do need is a walk-in cooler to where you can do all the prep on the first floor for the second floor restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And that prior to the first shift, you roll all that prep work into the cooler upstairs. And then the kitchen on the second floor becomes a finishing kitchen.
Right, right.
And so whenever the ticket comes up, you finish it. The menu is designed for that finished kitchen, and it all works. It's got its own little dish pit, and all the plates stay on the second floor, or the glassware stays on the second floor. Trust me, it's the best way to operate. And, it's a capital cost that, it's a big number to bite on the first end. But, when you have a party, when the client tells me that, well, we may have 2,500 people at a tournament. I mean, you got to be able to feed them. And the ticket times need to be somewhat normal. I mean, you get into 30, 40-minute ticket times, they're not coming back.
Right. And when you're talking a membership situation at a pickleball place like you were talking about, you want those members to be happy, absolutely happy.
Absolutely. Yes.
So, I would get that with, even country clubs or like the big giant country club that I was talking about that, my friend is at, the Rolling Hills Country Club. It's gigantic.
Yeah.
And, they're still trying to serve people out of one kitchen. Now, I remember you told me that you had designed a concept where you actually had 2 lines in the same kitchen space.
Yes. Yes.
So how do you do that? Because, a lot of places here, we can't shoehorn another kitchen in somewhere. But how do you make the kitchen more efficient for the different kinds of customers you've got coming in?
So what I did was with the kitchen, I had 2 cook lines and 2 prep lines. Mm-hmm. And the 2 cook lines that expoed, I had expo lines that faced one another. And I think I recall 10 feet in between those counters. So there was an expo A and an expo B, and depending on what part of the restaurant that servo is serving is where they would expo on A or B.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was like it was pretty amazing. I want to say they would get 300 meals out of there in about an hour.
And you've got the runners who are knowing which expo they have to work with to, finish whatever they're doing and get the food out to the people. So it's really an interesting concept.
One thing that I will say, the restaurant business is not an easy business.
Oh, everyone in the restaurant business knows this.
And everybody in the restaurant business knows this. And it's hats off to every operator out there and every owner out there because, I know what it takes. I know what the pitfalls are. I know what the ups and downs are. And I know the battles they battle. And, we deal with it every day, and that's why I think we're very successful at what we do, because we understand what their needs and their pitfalls are. And we're not just an architect that comes in. We're a complete design team that understands the operations of the machine that we're building for them, because that's what it is. Restaurants are a manufacturing plant. You got raw materials that come in the back, something happens to them in the kitchen, and you got finished product that goes out the front.
Mm-hmm.
And that has to operate flawlessly.
Yeah.
And, when you ask, how can just a regular person can't design a restaurant? Well, first you got to understand you have to understand how they operate.
Right.
And how they function.
Right.
Okay, and then you strip it to, okay, how can we make this operate with 4 people instead of 10 people?
Mm-hmm.
And that's all part of the design. I mean, I designed every kitchen I designed for the past 15 years. It works with 3 people on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and with 6 or 8 people on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
Because you got your slow days and your busy days.
Right. And your kitchen has to expand and decrease. It has to.
Correct.
It has to be able to move in both directions as the same edifice.
Correct. On Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, the kitchen staff is working in a 4-foot by 8-foot square.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? All 3 guys. Or whatever, 3 men. And then when it comes to the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, now they work in a 4-by-4 square. And there's no reason for them to go outside that 4-by-4 square. All their prep work should be done. It should be in the drawers, either under the cook equipment or just as they turn on the backside of the expo line.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Everything that they need at their station should be in that 4-by-4 square. And if they go out of that 4-by-4 square, somebody needs to start taking a look at why they're going out of the square.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's okay to go to the restroom, but that's it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting strategy to study. It's, you and I have talked for hours about this because,
Yes.
when you and I go into restaurants, I kind of go in from maybe. I mean, I think we both go in from a user experience, and we're looking at how the branding feeds into everything that is going on in the restaurant in front of house, right?
Correct.
But then I'm always curious to see what's going on in the kitchen. I want to see how the kitchen is laid out. I want to see what's going on there, because that is where your efficiencies are and where your deficiencies are. And, you were saying earlier that, you know what the restaurants need most. And I don't want to take this line from you because it's so good. But what do you think the restaurants need most? Like, what do you design a restaurant to do?
Make money.
Make money. That's right. And you say most restaurants are not designed to make money.
Correct. They're not. That is totally overlooked majority of the time.
And what do you think that is? Is it because they're trying to shoehorn their concept into an existing restaurant space, or is it because...
Well, but, I'll tell you a lot of things, Diane. Number one, there's a lot of equipment that's available but not necessarily efficient for whatever the concept may be. If you got 80 seats in the front of your house, you don't need equipment like you got a country club kitchen with 4 private dining rooms.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Right. So they load in too much equipment.
And there's a formula that it becomes to where, the formula is you either need people or equipment. And what do you need more of? Typically, the bigger kitchen, you need more equipment and less people.
Mm-hmm.
The smaller the kitchen, you need less equipment and more people.
Do you find that when restaurants start with a chef driving the restaurant space or the kitchen itself, that the menu sometimes creates more of the equipment thing instead of scaling it to, like, have you found that to be an issue?
Well, yeah, and we run into that a lot, and the chefs have their what they would like to see their kitchen function as, and for the most part we make it happen that way, but we go through their thumbnail sketch of their kitchen and their desires, and then we do our version and say, this is what we did here, and this is what we think you could use here, or, you can use this instead of this, which brings it more to a common cook line that 95% of the staff that works in the restaurant business is accustomed to.
Mm-hmm.
And they understand the flow. You got a pantry, you got a place for proteins, you got a place for sides, you got a place for desserts. That's a typical kitchen setup. And when you start breaking out of that mode, then you got to train staff in order to function. And
right.
they, you may have somebody with 20 years experience. It's like, man, I haven't worked in a kitchen like this.
Oh, yeah.
And, they get it sooner or later, but, it's the learning curve.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Which, that's the biggest killer of anything. Whether it's construction, design, operations, it's the learning curve.
Oh, right.
That is the biggest thing to overcome.
Well, I had asked you earlier, I'd love to hear your answer on this. What do you think is the biggest mistake you've made in restaurant development as you've worked with all of these different investors, owners, everybody?
The biggest mistake I ever made?
Mm-hmm.
Listening to an owner on design details on the side of the kitchen when I knew better.
Interesting.
And ended up redesigning a big portion of it to where he obtained probably 40 more seats in his dining room.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
And it was, when it opened, he was amazed how the kitchen worked without everything that should have been in, that he thought should have been in there.
Efficiency.
Every restaurant has real estate, okay? And when you get into the kitchen, I don't care how big the concept is, 30% is the magic number. That kitchen facilities should not exceed 30% of the entire space.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you there's times that, I beat myself up getting it to 30%, but, we like the 27 to 28. We like that because that's all the real estate you need. You don't need, like in Laguna, you don't need a restaurant with a 22 by 8 walk-in cooler.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The real estate's too expensive. So you cut back the walk-in cooler size to where you get deliveries every day.
Right.
Trust me, every purveyor in any city in the country would be more than happy to bring you product every day.
Mm-hmm.
For a fee.
Yeah. And that fee is going to be less than the loss than what you would be losing in the square footage.
And then wine storage is another thing that I push back all the time. I got one client, she wants to have 3,500 bottles in her restaurant. For what?
Show.
That's easily a $100,000 investment.
Yeah. You remember you were talking about the Indian restaurant that you were working on, and you said, okay, we want to do this with the wine in the front. So I don't mean to distract you off of this, but that was such a great story. Talk about how you were developing that.
Okay, so I'm pretty well done with the schematic design. I've given it to production. You can start on construction docs, but it's actually 2 restaurants in one. It's an Indian menu, but I put a chef kitchen in the middle of the dining room and kind of privatized it somewhat. Seats 40 people. But right behind that cook line, I put a wine cellar, but it's bottled wine cellar, so it's the door's open. But the thing of it is, the wine in that display will be the 1,000 and up bottle of wine, because that is a 250 check average at that upscale dining. Now you get down to the regular dining room, chances of somebody spending $1,000 on a bottle of wine is not going to happen. It'll be rare, but they can go get it. But the wine display that I put on the lower level is the $75 to $250 bottle of wine.
And how many bottles do you have in display for, the $1,000 bottles?
I think it's 300.
Oh, that's quite a bit. Yeah, and so they're in an upscale, privatized chef's kitchen.
Correct.
And they know that they're there for more of the flash and the dash from the chef, and they know that they've got these beautiful bottles of wine. So it's really about, how they how they feel like they're showing up being in that particular space in that restaurant.
Correct.
Yeah.
And typically, when you're in the higher end of, when you're in the higher end of wine, you're gonna buy typically a case or two.
Mm-hmm.
So it's best to make room for the case or two.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Of any specific one. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Well, now,
you're not gonna buy 100 bottles of one specific wine that's
Correct.
$800 a bottle.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Then it's not special.
So when you spent all of your time in Laguna Beach and you were in all of these different restaurants, because I know you and your wife, Mary, you love eating out.
Oh, yeah.
And you love the experience of it. So
Yes.
when you were in Laguna Beach and you're seeing us deal with locals in the winter and more of a tourist traffic thing in the summer,
Yes.
how do you recommend that the restaurants survive both seasons in the same space?
Well, that's a tough question, but I will tell you how my personal view.
Mm-hmm.
The loyalty, the brand loyalty of the locals. That has to be priority. It has to be the priority of the restaurant.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because they're your bloodline.
Yep, they are. And that's why you and I met, because we were talking about what I would do with the locals in town to get them interested in, pre-opening and all that sort of thing, because it's so important.
Correct.
For locals love to hear about the new restaurants, and they love to hear about when they're supposed to be opening. And they really
Correct.
do truly want to support those restaurants.
Yes.
And so it's important to have that out on the front end, and those PR people need to know what the day is too.
Yes. No. And that's what I'm saying. I know you asked me one time, what about social media and how do you what's your timing on that? Well, as soon as we get renderings done and the floor plans approved, then we start a little bit of a social media campaign, because we have a lot of followers. We show the people what we're working on next,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of gives ownership of the restaurant, a pretty big leap, because when they engage, people already know about them.
Right. Well, and you have cachet as one
Yes.
of these big developers, and so people do follow you. I mean, you had a TV show, for heaven's sake. So,
Yes.
they want to know where you're working next and who's hired you next and what that concept is.
Absolutely. And it's a great handoff. When we were doing the TV show, I was doing 4 episodes for every restaurant concept that we were doing at the time. And right after the 3rd show, we'd start pushing the reveal show.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you, every reveal show that we did, there was a line around every restaurant.
Right.
around the block.
Yeah. Oh, to be so fortunate to be on your TV show with your brand new restaurant. Oh, that's awesome. So let me ask you this. Why do you think, we've only got like 8 minutes left, 10 minutes left. Why do you think people choose you? Why do you think these owners choose you over other restaurant architects? Because there are plenty of restaurant architects in the country.
The numbers tell the story, Diane. It's our program. The restaurant client starts with us and ends with us. There's no handoffs in between. There's no room for us to make an excuse, whether it be a design and their construction, whatever it is. We're their development partner from
Mm-hmm.
start to finish.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure there's a whole lot of firms out there that can say that.
Very interesting. Yeah. Well, and
because we're the development firm for that particular owner. And, we've had national concepts that have done it. Let's hire the architect. Let's put it up to bid for 3 contracts. We do this, do this. We did one with a concept that did it that way for 14 stores. The guy was calling me, the owner was calling me at night. He goes, when do I start hearing the problems? When do the stories start about all the things that are going wrong? I said, well, Stuart, we don't have any problems. Everything's, we're building it as designed, and You know, I got a couple city issues, but it's not anything that we can't overcome.
Huh. Yeah.
And at the end of the first one, he said, you know what? I never knew this existed, and I will tell you, I will never do it again any other way than the way we just did it. He said, if I build another 50 restaurants, you'll do every one of them just like this.
Wow. Wow, that's just such a great endorsement. You know, the other thing that I think is so impressive about what you do is that you've developed your own food and beverage concepts. So you haven't just designed the restaurants. You've actually, you know, like you created a food hall to test different concepts, and they were all yours. You know, and so you've got an idea of how to make efficiencies work and how to, you know, you actually have stepped into that space and been in that space. And a lot of restaurant architects are not in that space. They've never developed their own food and beverage concept. And like you said, it's its own beast. You know, it is something tough, and it is a commitment and a passion that so few people understand, because you've got to do it every single day, every single night. You've got to be there taking care of all of these people and providing that food, the manufacturing plant, so to speak. And it's endless. It goes on and on and on. And, you know,
and you know me well enough, I can say this. It's a passion for me to do this every day. I don't ever have a bad day.
Well, and you have, I mean, you've developed such a great
very
reputation.
Fortunate.
Yeah. You know, when I was doing all of my marketing, I had a big, you know, multi-million-dollar marketing agency, and I was working all over the world for all kinds of entities. And it was finally when I met up with a Michelin-starred chef in restaurants in Vegas, they hired my company to come out there and do the marketing for them. And it was like around 2000, 2001. That was it. I was in for restaurants for the rest of my life. I changed the whole agency to just hospitality, because it's so amazing to work in that kind of a passion. And and I feel it too. I love it. I love food. I love the chefs. I love the owners. I love the fact that they make such a huge commitment. Most of them don't get huge bank financing. They're all doing it, you know, out of their own pockets, because they just feel like they have to create this concept.
Yep. No, and I mean, you know the story. You know the story of, you know, when I was asked to, well, you know, I can't pay you. If you can just wait 90 days for me to pay you.
That was a huge story. Yeah. I want you to tell that story if you can. We've only got a few minutes, but it's such a great story.
Well, it was a restaurateur that this was his third attempt at trying to get a concept off the ground. And he had some financial difficulties, and there was a landlord, a developer in Dallas that took them under his wing, and they did 2 build-to-suits that I did. Okay? And we finished them, and it was an 80-20 split, and he had to pay the 20% of whatever it was. Anyway, when it come time to pay me, he said, well, Bruce, I don't have it right now, but if you can give me 90 days, I'll pay you 110% of what I owe you. Just don't lean the property, and don't, you know, just work with me. I said, well, you know, you seem like a fair enough guy. I'll work with you.
That's a big chance to take.
I worked with you, and, you know, for the next 20 years until he passed, whenever he seen me, he would actually get out of his car with tears in his eyes and hug me. Or if we were out to dinner, he'd walk across the entire restaurant. Now, I got to tell you, he had a polo accident, so he was somewhat crippled. And he would walk across the complete restaurant to give me a hug with tears in his eyes. And one day, his wife asked me, she goes, you know, every time he sees you, why does he tear up? So I told her the story real quick. Well, it ended up being a beautiful story, and at the end of the day, the gentleman's name is Norm Brinker. Brinker International.
Oh, my goodness. Isn't that amazing? Well, it's amazing that he had the confidence and he knew that it was going to be okay in 90 days, because that is a huge belief. And that he also knew that you had designed a restaurant that was going to produce that for him. And
you want to know something? That restaurant still stands today.
Wow. That's incredible.
I built it in 1987.
Wow. Pretty amazing. That's amazing.
Yep.
Well, I love these stories, and it has been a great introduction, I hope, to my audience to understand the depth of understanding that you have and knowledge that you have and experience that you have in these restaurants.
Forward to it, for sure.
Yes, and I know that we're going to have, chefs and owners and even just regular patrons. I mean, we haven't even talked about the front of house and what to do with that. But we're going to have a lot of questions coming in that I'll start peppering you with as we move forward on this. But I just think it's so important for people to understand just how complex a restaurant is. And when they're in a space, especially on the new days when they just open a restaurant and they're just getting their feet under themselves, and everyone rushes in to try the restaurant and then they come out complaining about it, that just breaks my heart because those first couple of days, you're never going to hit it 100%. And it is that news on the front end that can destroy a restaurant. And they have put so much effort and time and expertise into it, So this, I think, is helping patrons understand just how much actually goes into this world. So I really appreciate the knowledge.
Thank you for joining Bruce and Diane on this journey of mastering restaurant revenue. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your feedback helps them deliver even more of what you want to hear. Until next time, keep refining your approach, stay passionate about your craft, and here's to your restaurant's continued success.